Is war between China and Taiwan inevitable? That's a big question being asked right now, as the Chinese military has, once again, decided to ramp up its military drills around Taiwan. Now, trying to answer a question like this is complicated. Some experts say that yes, a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is inevitable, while others maintain that conflict can still be avoided. So I talked to a range of experts to try to get their thoughts on how both of these arguments break down. Let's start with the first one. There are a number of reasons why a Chinese invasion of Taiwan may, at the very least, seem like an inevitability. The first reason is the Chinese Communist Party and its leaders have made it very difficult for themselves to change direction.
They're kind of ideologically trapped.
The Chinese have, in effect, talked themselves into a corner.
For decades, China's leaders have repeatedly told the public that, effectively, China can only achieve greatness and its people can only achieve true happiness if China reclaims Taiwan, despite the fact that the PRC has never actually controlled Taiwan. Making such a big deal about how important Taiwan is means anything short of full unification would be seen as a catastrophic failure.
They'll be judged historically as great failures if they don't do this, if they can't achieve it.
No regime in China can actually withstand the pressures coming through by losing territory.
Not only that, but giving up on Taiwan would damage one of the CCP's big narratives, that of course the people of Taiwan want to unify with China because its system of government is the only way the people of China can achieve greatness.
Taiwan provides an alternative model of governance to the Chinese people whereby you can have prosperity and you can have democracy at the same time.
It's an outright challenge, this idea that only through communism and through a socialist system that China can become strong and return to its rightful place.
The flip side of the CCP's unwillingness to change course is the unwillingness of the Taiwanese people to accept unification. Chinese officials have claimed that the people of Taiwan see themselves as Chinese and want to unify.
The majority of the people in Taiwan believe they're Chinese. They are for reunification.
But according to decades of polling, that's simply not true, and is becoming even less true as time passes.
Taiwanese people really have their own distinct sense of identity that's quite separate to Chinese identity.
For the people of Taiwan, identity isn't just about ethnicity. It's about a way of life, and more specifically, freedom and democracy.
People really, really care. They care much more about democracy than who you actually vote for.
You see these enormous rallies during the election period where they're extremely colourful, there's lots of songs and dancing.
Very proud, we choose our own president. We are the light of the world. We love freedom. We love democracy.
The thriving democracy Taiwan has today is something that the people of Taiwan have spent decades fighting for.
It's just unimaginable that the people of Taiwan would ever accept the kinds of policies that Beijing would try and implement.
Taiwan is regularly ranked as one of the most free and democratic places in the world, while China regularly ranks as one of the least. Another problem experts point to is China's constant use of things like military drills as a way to threaten and pressure Taiwan.
PRC's constant threats to Taiwan and pressure has really normalized itself. So for many voters, it's just one of these things that you have to live with.
Certainly walking around day to day, there's nothing really to suggest or remind you that there is this ongoing tension with China. It's not a common topic of everyday conversation.
Experts say this is partly why the Chinese government feels the need to constantly escalate the threats it's making.
China's just on this threat escalation pathway. It needs to keep escalating because the Taiwanese and everyone just sort of gets used to it after a while, so they've got to keep ratcheting it up.
This escalation increases the risk of a real conflict breaking out.
The more and more this happens and the riskier behaviour that the PLA in particular takes, the more likely we are to see some kind of accident. And that is really in the near term where something could go badly wrong.
Finally, there's the argument that the stalemate that we see today, also known as the status quo, can't last forever. Right now, as long as Taiwan doesn't try to officially become independent, it still gets to mostly act as if it is, even though most of the world doesn't recognise it. The problem is that China has only ever seen this status quo as temporary, and has repeatedly said that unification is inevitable, and that it will use all necessary means to make it happen. So, if China says unification is inevitable, and Taiwan isn't willing to budge, why have 70 years passed without an invasion? The same reason why a number of experts maintain that invasion still isn't inevitable. War is horrific, messy and costly, and is almost always seen as a last resort, particularly when everyone involved has more to lose than they have to gain.
None of the three parties seek conflict. Tensions might be rising, but there is no desire to go to war over the issue right now.
Experts say that this mentality is reflected in the official approaches China, Taiwan, and the US are currently taking. For example, the Taiwanese have made it clear they're not interested in unification. But instead of risking a push for official independence, polling shows the majority are happy to settle for the unofficial independence and peace of the status quo.
Because any move towards a formal declaration of independence is also going to trigger Beijing to use force. They know that, they understand it.
Then there's the US. It's a common misconception that the US officially supports Taiwanese independence. Its actual position is that any resolution between the two sides simply has to be mutual and peaceful. The US has only signalled it would step in to defend Taiwan if China decided to force unification by invading. And finally, the Chinese government maintains that its intention is to unify with Taiwan peacefully, which might sound strange amongst all of the military drills and threats, but does make ideological sense.
Yeah, there is this idea that if unification represents the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, then you shouldn't need to fight the people you're trying to unify with in order to achieve that. There's this idea that the Taiwanese should want to come back to the motherland, and China just needs to wait, and they will. And the idea is that because of the foreign forces and the separatists, China might have to launch military action, but there is a kind of ideological resistance to doing that.
So, with all things considered, is a Chinese invasion of Taiwan inevitable? As it stands right now, the people of Taiwan are only moving further away from the idea of unification with China. And if the CCP is truly serious about ending the status quo and making unification happen by any means necessary, then yes, conflict may seem inevitable. But it's important to understand the limitations of a statement like this. The honest answer is, tensions may be especially high right now, and the threat of an invasion may be becoming more likely with every passing year. But you can never really rule out the possibility that conflict can be avoided. After all, this has been going on for more than 70 years, and while the status quo may not be a permanent solution, when the stakes are this high, all parties seem to agree the status quo is better than the alternative, at least for now.